Hello, I'm Donna Rodriguez. Welcome to the Pembroke Select Board candidate interview. I wanted to take a moment to thank our candidate for participating in this interview and collaborating with PAC TV to bring this informational programming to residents and voters this election season. Let me explain the format. We will be conducting a one-on-one interview-style Q&A format with each candidate, lasting about 30 minutes. Responses will not be timed, and follow-up questions may be asked. We aim to ask up to 4 questions, but that will depend on the length of the responses, along with any follow-up discussion during this exchange. Candidates will be allowed to address anything not covered or that they would like to add clarification to at the end of the interview in their closing remarks. So let's get started. Today we're speaking with Jessica Bradley Rushing, one of the 2 candidates for the Pembroke Select Board in the Pembroke town election. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We're glad we can have you in studio this year.
Very exciting.
Well, let's just dive right in. Now, as you know, infrastructure and its upkeep can be a challenge for any town. What, from your point of view, are the 3 priorities for improving infrastructure in the town, and how do they align with the master plan for Pembroke?
I actually think infrastructure is one of the biggest needs that we need to address over the next few years in the town of Pembroke. We have a lot of deferred maintenance that needs to take place both for our buildings and our roads. The top priority, I believe, is something that we've already started to address by passing, last year we did an override at town meeting to fund the construction of a new community center. I see the new community center, which will include a rec center and the Council on Aging building, as really a catalyst for the revitalization of the downtown area in Pembroke. In addition to the community center piece, though, all the surrounding buildings there in Pembroke Center also need maintenance, repair, renovation, and a thoughtful plan for how all of those buildings are going to be used in a way that makes Pembroke Center sort of a welcoming community building kind of place. So step 1, I believe, is the community center and the revitalization of the town center. Step 2 also involves buildings. We need a new public safety building. Our police department and our fire department buildings are both in bad shape and not in a condition that they can even just be repaired. We've passed that point. So we need to look at what a new public safety building would look like, what it would include, where it would be located. And we've started that process already with the creation of a public safety building committee. They're meeting and working and planning, and we'll probably hear from them at fall town meeting with some information about what the next steps can and should be. And then I think the third piece in terms of infrastructure and maintenance in the town is the roadways. So anyone who has driven in Pembroke recently knows that we have some issues with potholes and a need for road maintenance. And unfortunately, we have not in the past had sort of a holistic road management plan. But working with the new town manager who's been in the position just under 2 years now, we actually, for the first time that I know of, have a pavement management plan in place to address the maintenance that should have been happening over the course of many years and get the roadways up to a condition that makes it easier to drive in Pembroke without fearing that you're going to break an axle as you drive down the road. But we also have a plan for how to continually sort of rotate which roads are getting service, what kind of service they're getting, so that you're not ever getting to a point where a road is in such poor condition that it has to be completely, essentially gutted and rebuilt from, scraped down and rebuilt from the bottom up. That's much more expensive when you have to do the roads like that. So having a maintenance plan that it will take a little while to completely, take care of all the issues that we have on Pembroke roads, but we've started in that direction with a plan for how to address the worst roads in the beginning and then maintain the roads so that we're never in a position where we are right now and have a lot of miles and miles of roadway that needs to be completely renovated.
So those are 3 very key areas,
Yep.
The community center, the public safety building that would be combined, as well as the roads throughout town. How do you feel that those priorities play into the master plan for the town?
So we're actually in the process of redoing our master plan. Ours was very out of date.
Okay.
I believe the last time it was reviewed, I think our last master plan was from 2005, if I have that right in my head. So the master plan is sort of being reshaped at the same time that we're talking about this need for infrastructure. I think that because of that, that gives us an advantage where we can we are almost forced, because we're redoing the master plan, to think about these things holistically and to plan both in terms of budget and timing for the best ways to address these major infrastructure needs, and make sure that the master plan incorporates that when we finalize it over the course of the next few months to a year, I think.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Moving on, there are some social media sites that have really become a type of virtual town hall, where residents discuss issues, they voice their opinions on various topics, things that are happening in town. How would you balance the use of social media as a tool of engagement versus having open public discussion at public meetings? So
my background is actually in communications. My previous job prior to where I work now was as the communications director for a nonprofit. So this is something that I think about a lot and occasionally struggle with, because it is a difficult balance. We need to be able to leverage social media to ensure that residents of town have information about what's going on, have updates, particularly in times of emergency, like during the pandemic or during a storm. We need to be able to use social media effectively to ensure that the right information is getting out to people. But I also know from personal experience, as we all do, that social media can sort of be a double-edged sword. There are official Pembroke social media channels that are used by the town to put out information, but those are not necessarily always the social media channels where those debates that you're talking about happen. The unofficial channels are sort of where people have organically gravitated and tend to have these discussions, but that doesn't always lend itself to ensuring accurate information is what is being discussed and passed around. And then there's also the factor of public meetings. So when we have, for example, a select board meeting, we have the option to put on the agenda a community comment period if there's something particularly important or a resident brings forward an issue that they'd like to discuss. We don't have the ability to just sort of have open discussion at a select board meeting. That's not the purpose of the meeting, and we actually are at those meetings to attend to the business of the town, as opposed to, debate specific topics. We have on the town website the policy for submitting comments for the public meetings, and we try to adhere to that so that we're consistent in our application of those rules. But I do think there is a balance to be had between official social media channels, unofficial social media channels, and then the actual public discussion, and it's one that we constantly work to do better at.
And it is definitely been a very changing environment over the last 10 to 15 years. And you talk about the unofficial pages that many residents in many communities gravitate to. Since there are conversations taking place there, how do you feel that elected or appointed officials should utilize those channels or communicate on those channels?
I think it's a difficult topic. And I think it's a personal choice depending on the individual elected official or appointed official. There have been times where I've engaged on those pages, but I don't always feel that those engagements end up being beneficial to anybody. So my personal stance at this point is that I try to use my official Facebook page, for example, or a Twitter account to deliver information and answer questions that are asked of me, but I am sort of keeping my personal social media presence contained and limited to my personal acquaintances.
And communications has definitely been a topic that's been coming up in a lot of the comments that we've been receiving from residents about things that they'd like to talk about or they'd like to see addressed in interviews. And so continuing along with communications, over the last several years, public discourse unfortunately has become much more divisive, not just on a national level, but on local levels as well. And when making decisions that affect all residents, how do you balance the multitude of opinions you hear when coming to a consensus on something that affects everybody within the community?
My opinion on that, I think that the way that things are going nationally is, of course, the way things are going locally, because we don't exist in a bubble, right? Pembroke is just a microcosm of the larger region or state or national issues. So I don't necessarily find it surprising that those sorts of opinions and attitudes have trickled down. We all sort of interact on the local level, but we are part of the national discussion as well. When it comes to making decisions, I think there are a lot of occasions where the most vocal opinions are considered the majority. And I have found over the course of the last 3 years being on the select board that there are many people who are uncomfortable voicing their opinions in a public way, but who reach out to elected and appointed officials sort of directly, either through email or social media or a phone call or a text, to say, this is how I feel about this, and I hope you take my opinion into consideration, or thank you for supporting this particular initiative. I don't want to say anything publicly, but this is how I feel. And so it's hard to balance, I think, the sometimes public perception of what the majority opinion is with the background information that you often are privy to as an elected official who people reach out to for information and assurance. I try my best to ensure that I am making decisions in a way that, I mean, first is in keeping with my values and my beliefs, but in a way that is thoughtful about everyone's opinions, while acknowledging that not everyone is getting all the same information that I am getting from people who live in town.
So that, of course, is a challenging, road to walk for every elected official. And there are other things that play into it as well, I would imagine. When you're dealing with the situations where you might be hearing things outside of meetings from residents and voters, how do you moderate those conversations publicly so that everybody, all residents, can hear different parts of the conversation? And how do you manage your own personal thoughts and ideas as well into that mix as a resident yourself?
It is very challenging. It is very challenging because there are often occasions where people are expressing their opinions or concerns to me in a way that is clear that they don't want that information shared. So while I understand the different perspectives, it's also not my story to tell when someone says, oh, XYZ happened in my neighborhood or to my family, and for that reason, I support this initiative or don't support this initiative, but I don't want to talk about that publicly, and so it's not up to me to tell those stories publicly because they're not mine. The people who are willing to come to the public meetings when there is community comment and open debate about specific topics, I try to treat each person who comes to the microphone with the same level of acceptance and understanding. And I know that there's no possible way that I'm ever going to agree with everybody. I mean, that's just not how the world works. So I attempt, and I'm sure that I fail occasionally, and I'm sure that I succeed occasionally. I attempt to treat the people who come to the meetings to express their opinions with the same level of respect that I would hope that they would treat the members of the board, and just manage the meeting sort of as it happens, and that's the best that I can do.
Okay, all right, thank you. As a member of the select board, what you and the other board members decide now is going to have a lasting impact on the town, on its residents, and it's for years to come. How do you take that responsibility into consideration as part of the every week or even every day decision-making process as a member of that board?
That is actually something that I am always, always cognizant of, and it is really one of the underlying reasons why I ran for the select board in the first place. I grew up in Pembroke, but I moved away in 2001, 2-ish when I enlisted in the Army, and didn't live here for the next 17 years. I moved back in 2018 with my husband and my kids because I love it here. And there were so many things that I was glad to see hadn't changed, but then I also looked around and realized that some things that probably should have changed hadn't, and that, I think, is the underlying reason why I ran, is that I am always thinking about how Pembroke is going to be, not just for me, but for my kids and my grandkids. Are they going to want to live here when they grow up and have a family of their own? And what decisions are we making to ensure that this is a place that they can afford to live in, or is a welcoming community that opens its arms to every type of person? And are we also making decisions that set the town up for success in the future so that we're not constantly behind and looking at ways to sort of dig out of a hole in terms of maybe infrastructure or, you know, the many decisions that we have to make on the board. So that's, I mean, really the driving force behind many of my decisions is not just how this decision will affect people who live in town now, but how it will affect people who live in town in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road.
Okay, thank you. And it's interesting because in this, not just in this election season, but right now, coming towards hopefully the tail end or coming back out publicly from a global pandemic, so many things have changed and so many processes have changed, opinions have changed, ways of looking at our world, but also our towns and our neighborhoods have changed over the last couple of years. And today, what type of town would you say Pembroke is? If somebody was considering moving to Pembroke, what do you think are the things that show the quality of life in Pembroke? And what defines Pembroke?
So I actually think Pembroke is at a transition point right now. That's really how I see the town. We are moving into a period of, I think, progress and updating some of the things that maybe fell by the wayside for too long. The infrastructure and roads as an example, but also one of the things that we just did on the select board and talked about last night at our meeting was we did an audit and a review of all the playgrounds in town to make sure that all the playgrounds were safe. So Pembroke, I think, is a community that attracts families, and we are working hard to ensure that we have the amenities that families want to see. So having all of our playgrounds be safe, secure, and updated is important to people with little kids, you know, and we have amazing trails. We have an open space committee that works really hard to maintain outdoor spaces that all the residents can enjoy. And we have a good school system. I have 3 kids in the Pembroke schools right now, and although the last 2 years have been very difficult because of COVID, and we had a whole year where my 3 boys were all fully virtual, working on all their schoolwork from home, we've been really happy with their individual experiences and our collective experience in the Pembroke school system. So I think that we have created a town that is welcoming to families, and we can only hope to continue to improve that by, you know, taking into consideration what people are looking for in a community and ensuring that that's how we prioritize our decision making on the select board. And for those older folks who, you know, maybe their kids have moved out, we also want to make sure that we've created a town that you can grow old in without difficulty, right? So something like the new community center, which will have the Council on Aging building and have so many more spaces and programs available to our seniors in town, I think is huge, because we do have a large senior population in the town of Pembroke, and it is growing. In the next few years, it's going to grow fairly rapidly, and we want to be able to provide a place where we can really build community across generations. So that is, to me, what Pembroke is. I mean, I consider this my home. I moved back here because I could have gone anywhere, and we chose to come back here because I do love it here. And I think that it is a community that embraces sort of a small town feel and a family atmosphere, and I want to ensure that we keep that.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to give you a couple of minutes now to be able to speak to issues that maybe you haven't had an opportunity to talk about, if there's anything about yourself that you'd like to share with viewers and residents, and just be able to speak to the residents directly.
Sure. So I am running for re-election because, I mean, as I've said already, Pembroke is my home, and I want this to be a place that my children will also consider home. It's why we moved back here. The 3 biggest issues, which we've already touched on a lot of them, that I see and the things that I'm running my campaign on are the revitalization of the town center. Right now, it's not a place where a lot of families gather, where a lot of residents get together, but I think we have a real opportunity to make a change there and create a real active, vibrant town center that will be a linchpin for the community to come together and share that space, and potentially also attract, you know, development of more businesses in the area, so that you could drop your kids off at the community center, walk across the street and get a meal or a drink with friends, and have a really walkable, vibrant area that creates even greater sense of belonging in the town. So the revitalization of the town center I see as a key to the next few years in Pembroke. The other thing that I think really is important, in addition to the infrastructure that we've already discussed, is thinking about affordability of the housing in Pembroke. So we moved into our home in 2018, and since then, our home value has increased by 30%. We literally probably could not afford to buy the house that we're in today if we were buying it today. Pembroke is just an expensive place to live, and we have a real housing shortage across the Commonwealth. So looking at ways to ensure that we have adequate affordable housing stock so that people who want to move in, maybe younger families who are just starting out, or seniors who want to downsize and no longer want to have a huge, single family home on an acre lot, but want to stay in the community where they've lived for decades. Having those options available to our residents means that we're not discounting anybody from being able to move here and make this place their home. So looking at a wide variety of housing types, not just single family homes, which are great. And I live in a single family home with my husband and our 4 kids, but if I didn't have 4 kids, I wouldn't necessarily need all that space and want to take care of all that maintenance. So having some of the condo developments that have gone in, we have Pembroke Woods as an apartment complex, and looking at ways that we can create diverse housing options at price points that don't exclude people from being able to move into the community. So those are the 3 big things that I really want to focus on over the course of the next few years, because I believe they'll build a foundation that will enable Pembroke to keep what's best with the small town feel and the strong sense of community, while also looking toward a strong future so that what we have today will still be there when our kids and grandkids are living in Pembroke, hopefully. I personally have really enjoyed the last 3 years being on the select board, and I think that my background, my experience, and my passion for all of these issues will only serve the town well over the course of the next 3 years. So I'm hoping that people will agree with me and come out and vote in the town election on May 14th.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a part of this today as well. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
And also, we wish you the best of luck during the campaign and on Election Day. For our viewers, thank you for joining us. If you're interested in watching replays of this interview, please visit our website, pactv.org/elections, for replay times and online viewing options, including PacTV's on-demand and streaming service, PacTV Prime. And please make your choices heard by voting in the election on Saturday, May 14th. Thank you and good day.